Alone in the snow, the wind howled through the trees, sharp and cold like a knife. Snowflakes fell from the dark sky, covering the forest in white. It was quiet, too quiet. Only the crunch of Jack's boots could be heard as he walked through the deep snow. He lived alone in a small wooden cabin near the mountains. Far from any town, he liked the silence, the peace, but tonight felt strange. Something was wrong. Jack had just returned from collecting firewood. His arms were tired, and the cold had reached his bones. As he placed the logs near the fireplace, he heard it. A soft sound, distant and broken. It was a cry. Not from any animal he knew. It was high-pitched, weak, and full of pain. It sounded like a child, alone, lost, and scared. He grabbed his coat, flashlight, and rushed outside. The snow was thick, and the wind made it hard to see, but he followed the sound, step by step. It led him deeper into the forest, away from the trail. Then he saw something small curled up under a tree. At first, he thought it was just a pile of snow. But then it moved, and the crying grew louder. He ran toward it and stopped, frozen in shock. It was a girl, but not like any girl he had ever seen. She was tiny, maybe 4 or 5 years old. Her skin was silver blue and glowing softly. Her eyes were big and bright like stars. She had no shoes, just thin clothes, not made for cold. Her hair shimmered with colors, blue, white, and silver strands. She looked at Jack and whispered something in a strange language. Then she cried again. Jack didn't understand what she was saying, but he knew one thing: she needed help. Without thinking, he picked her up. She was ice cold, shaking, and very light. He wrapped her in his coat and hurried back to the cabin. The girl didn't fight. She just held on to his shirt with tiny glowing fingers. Her skin felt warm, but her body was weak. Jack could feel her heartbeat slowing. Back inside, he placed her near the fire and gave her a blanket. He made warm soup and held the cup to her lips. She sipped slowly, her eyes watching him closely. Still, she said nothing he could understand. But there was something in her look. A silent thank you, filled with fear and sadness. She looked around the cabin, like she had never seen such a place before. Everything was new to her. Jack tried to talk to her. "What's your name?" he asked. She tilted her head, confused. He pointed to himself. "Jack." She looked at him, blinked slowly, and whispered, "Yaka." He smiled. "Close enough." Then he pointed to her. "You?" She looked down, her face full of sorrow. No answer came that night. Strange things happened. The fire burned brighter than usual. The lights flickered without reason. And the wind outside suddenly stopped, as if something powerful had passed by. Jack didn't know what to think. Was this little girl causing it? Was she even real? Or was he dreaming? He stayed awake while she slept, curled up in the blanket like a kitten. She looked peaceful now, safe, but Jack could see the mark on her forehead, a glowing symbol like a star and a moon combined. It wasn't painted or drawn, it was part of her skin glowing softly in the dark. He knew now, without doubt, she was not from this world, but who had left her here? And why? He remembered her crying, alone in the snow. It wasn't just fear, it was heartbreak. Someone had left her behind, someone who didn't plan to return. As the fire crackled and the wind picked up again, Jack looked out the window. The forest was silent once more, but now it held a secret he had brought home. And outside, in the distance, hidden in the sky, a strange light blinked once, then disappeared. Jack didn't see it, but the girl's eyes opened slowly. She stared at the ceiling, and a single tear ran down her glowing cheek. Her lips moved without sound, and the mark on her forehead pulsed. With light, somewhere, something had felt her presence, and it was coming. The morning sun rose slowly behind the mountains. Its light touched the snow-covered forest, turning the white ground golden. Inside the wooden cabin, warmth filled the air. Jack stood near the window, sipping coffee. Still thinking about the night before, the little alien girl was still sleeping. Wrapped in a thick blanket by the fire, her silver-blue skin looked calm in the soft glow of morning. But Jack's mind was not calm. He knew this was no normal child. He had seen strange things in his life. War, danger, even near death. But this was something new, something beyond understanding. She had come from the stars. And now she was lying on his couch, crying in the snow, abandoned. Why was she left behind? Who were her people? Would they return for her? Or was she truly alone? Jack sat down beside her and waited. After some time, her eyes opened slowly, bright and full of light, like small galaxies. She looked around, confused, then saw Jack. Her small hand reached out and touched his coat. He smiled. "Good morning, little one." She didn't reply with words, but her face softened. She was starting to trust him. Jack brought her a bowl of warm oatmeal. She looked at it, then at him, unsure. He picked up the spoon and fed her slowly. After the second bite, she took the spoon herself. Copying his motions, she was learning fast, smart, observant, quiet. Jack noticed how carefully she watched everything: the light switch, the fireplace, the spoon, like it was all new to her. Later that day, Jack took out an old notebook and pen. He drew a picture of a star, then pointed up at the sky. Her eyes followed his hand. Then he drew a small figure, a spaceship, and Earth. The girl watched with growing interest. She leaned over the notebook and drew something herself, a strange symbol, like a triangle with a circle inside. Jack stared at it, confused. She placed her small hand on the symbol and whispered softly. "Sula," Jack repeated. "Sula," she nodded. Was that her planet, her people, her home? Jack noticed the girl avoided mirrors. Every time she saw her reflection, she turned away. There was sadness in her face, like she didn't want to be reminded. She wasn't just lost. She was broken. Memories, fear, confusion, it was all. In her eyes, she couldn't tell her story with words. But her silence told everything. In the evening, Jack gave her a soft toy, a small stuffed bear. She looked at it for a long time, then hugged it tightly. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Jack sat beside her, unsure of what to do. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder. And then something strange happened. Images flashed through his mind. Stars, a glowing spaceship, a woman with the same glowing skin. The woman was crying, holding the little girl close, whispering goodbye. A dark shadow appeared behind her, something powerful, something hunting. The woman placed the child in a silver pod and pushed it away into space. Then everything went black. Jack gasped and pulled his hand back. He looked at the girl, shocked. She had shared a memory directly into his mind. No words, no sound, just pure feeling and image. Jack now knew the truth. She had been sent to Earth to escape something dangerous. Her mother had saved her by. Leaving her behind, the girl looked at Jack with big, tired eyes. He nodded slowly. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe now." She reached out and touched his chest. Right over his heart. "Yaka," she said again, this time with more feeling. Jack smiled. "And you?" "Our Luma." The girl paused, then nodded slowly. From that moment, she had a name. That night, Jack placed Luma in the bed, tucking her in gently. He checked the locks on the doors, closed the curtains, and turned off the lights. But something strange happened again. As he walked away, he saw the lights flicker. The old radio in the corner turned on by itself, static filling the air. Luma sat up, her eyes glowing, her hand raised toward the radio. A voice crackled through the static. Not human, not clear, just a repeating sound, almost like a call. Jack rushed over and turned off the radio. Luma's hand dropped, and she looked confused. Did you do that?" he asked. She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said yes. She had sent a signal. And someone out there might have heard it, outside the cabin, far above the earth. A blinking red light appeared on a hidden satellite. It began to move. Scanning the earth below, searching, something was listening, and it had just woken up. The forest was quiet again, but Jack could feel it. Something had changed. Ever since Luma touched the radio, the air inside the cabin felt different. It was heavier, full of tension, like the calm before a storm. Luma sat near the fire, hugging her stuffed bear. Her eyes were glowing softly, watching the flames move. She didn't speak. But Jack could sense she knew what she had done. She had called out to someone, or something. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his bed. Strange. Visions flooding his mind. He saw stars spinning fast, then slowing down. A planet with silver oceans and floating cities. He saw Luma as a baby, smiling in her mother's arms. They were happy, peaceful, safe, until the sky darkened and shadows covered everything. The dreams became darker. Luma's mother was running, holding her tight. Behind her, tall black figures chased them with glowing red eyes. The ground cracked, buildings burned, and then silence. Luma was alone, inside a small silver pod floating in space. Tears ran down her tiny cheeks as she whispered a single word. Mama. Jack woke up, sweating, his heart racing. It felt so real. He sat up and looked across the room. Luma was standing there. Watching him silently, she walked closer and climbed onto the bed. Then she placed her hand on his forehead, and everything stopped, suddenly. Jack was inside her memory, but this time he was aware, awake. He stood on a strange world under two suns. He saw Luma's people, tall, glowing, beautiful. They lived in peace, using light and thought to build their world, but they were not alone. Dark ships filled the sky, blocking the sun's creatures. Without faces descended, destroying everything, Luma's people fought back. But they were few. Her mother, a powerful being, created a plan. Hide her child on a far planet. A blue planet, far from War Earth. Jack saw her mother placing her into a silver pod. She kissed her forehead and whispered goodbye. Tears in her eyes, hope in her heart. The pod shot into the stars, escaping just before the world exploded in light. Then Jack felt something sharp, the feeling of being completely alone. Luma's fear, her pain, her tiny heart breaking in. Silence. Jack opened his eyes, gasping. Luma was still touching his forehead, but her eyes were full of tears. He sat up and hugged her tightly. "I saw it," he whispered. "I saw everything." Luma said nothing, just rested her head on his chest. Now they understood each other, truly, deeply. From that moment, Jack stopped seeing her as just a visitor. She was more than a lost child. She was a survivor, carrying pain too big for her small body, but she was also full of wonder and light. Something rare, something powerful. Later that day, Jack noticed something strange. Luma was watching a bird outside the window. A small one, hurt, its wing broken. She walked out, slowly, carefully, and knelt beside it. She placed her hand over the bird's wing for a moment. Nothing happened. Then a soft glow came from her palm. The bird chirped, stood up, and flew away. Jack watched in shock. She had healed it with just a touch. Jack now knew she wasn't just from the stars. She brought a part of the stars with her, but it also meant something else. If she could do this, others would want her. They would come for her power, for her light, and they might not be as kind as Jack. That night, Jack checked the sky through his old telescope. He didn't expect to see anything, but then he saw it, a dark shape moving across the stars. Slow but steady. Not a plane, not a satellite. It had no lights, no signal, just shadow, watching, waiting. He pulled back from the telescope. his hands shaking. They were coming. Not just humans, not just the government, something else, something darker. And they were not far. Luma stood at the door, her eyes fixed on the same stars. She whispered a word Jack didn't understand, but her voice was soft, sad, and full of warning. She knew they were coming too, and this time she wouldn't be alone. Jack would protect her, no matter what came next. Asterisk snow was falling again, soft and silent. But Jack could feel the weight of every flake. Each one was a reminder that time was running out. He walked around the cabin, checking every door, every window. He had already added extra locks, covered the windows with blankets, and hidden his old rifle near the fireplace, not because of wild animals, but because something else was out there now, something not human. Luma sat quietly in the corner, holding her toy bear. She hadn't spoken since last night, not in her language, not in any words. But her eyes were full of knowing. She felt it. To a presence outside the cabin, invisible, silent, watching them from the shadows. Jack turned on his old radio again. It was silent now, just static and weak signals. But he kept checking it, every hour, every few minutes. He didn't want to be surprised. He already knew that something or someone had heard Luma's signal, and now the forest felt different. Even the animals were quiet, hiding around. Noon, Jack spotted something strange across the trees far beyond the fence. A black shape stood still, not a person, not an animal. It was a drone, small, hovering in the air. Watching the cabin from a distance, Jack grabbed his binoculars and zoomed in. It had no markings, no blinking lights, just a single red lens, staring straight at them. Then it flew away. Jack cursed under his breath. "They found us," he whispered. He turned to Luma, who now stood beside him, her face calm, but her eyes glowing just a little brighter. "They know you're here," Jack said. Luma nodded slowly. She understood more than he realized, and now she was ready. That night, the silence was broken by a car engine. Jack turned off all the lights and peered through the curtains. A black SUV stopped at the edge of the woods. 3 men stepped out, tall, dressed in black coats. They carried small silver cases, not weapons, but not friendly either. They didn't come to the door. Instead, one of them walked around the house with a scanner in hand. He pointed it at the ground, at the trees, at the roof, then at the window where Jack was hiding. Jack ducked quickly, heart pounding. He grabbed Luma's hand and whispered, "We need to hide." He led her to the cellar door, hidden under the rug. It was small, cold, and dark, but safe. They climbed down. Closing the trapdoor above them, Luma held his hand tightly, no longer afraid. She trusted him completely now. She knew he would protect her, even from the unknown. Upstairs, they heard soft footsteps. Then a knock on the front door, slow and steady. Jack didn't answer. Another knock, louder this time, then silence. They waited. Breath held. After what felt like an hour, the footsteps faded. The SUV engine roared to life and disappeared into the snowy night. But Jack knew it wasn't over. It had just begun. The next morning, Jack walked through the forest, checking the snow. He found footprints, deep and heavy, not just from boots, but from something else, large, clawed, not human. He followed them until they stopped at a tree. The bark was burned in a circle, shape like something had been teleported or pulled away. Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "They're not just watching," he whispered. "They're testing." That night, Luma surprised him. She sat at the table and placed her hand on his notebook. Then, slowly, she began drawing. Symbols, planets, stars. She pointed to one planet, circled it, then pointed to the sky. Jack leaned in. "This is where you came from." Luma nodded. Then she drew another circle beside it, black, spiked, surrounded by tiny dots. Jack didn't need words to understand. "That's who's chasing you." She nodded again, more slowly this time. Then she drew a small symbol. At the bottom, a cabin, a tree, and two small figures. Jack smiled. "You and me," he said. She reached out and touched his face, smiling back. For a moment, they forgot the danger outside. But far away, deep in the forest, something moved through the snow. Not a man, not a machine, a creature. Tall, thin, glowing slightly. Its black skin shimmered like metal. Its eyes scanned the land, searching for heat. For energy, it stopped, raised its head, and let out a sound high. Soft, but full of hunger. Then it turned, walking toward the cabin. Slowly, carefully. Back at the cabin, Jack loaded his rifle. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew it was closer now. Too close, Luma looked at him, then at the door. Her eyes were glowing again, brighter than before. She raised her hand, and a soft blue light filled the room. Jack stepped beside her and whispered, "Whatever happens, we stay together." Outside, the snow fell faster, and the shadows moved. The forest no longer felt like Earth. It was cold, yes, but the silence was wrong. The birds were gone. The air was still. Even the trees stood like statues, as if they were watching, waiting, inside the cabin. Jack paced across the floor, his hands shaking slightly. He was a soldier once, trained to face danger. But this was different. This was not war. This was a hunt. Luma sat by the fireplace, her eyes glowing faintly blue. She wasn't afraid, but she was alert, like she could feel them getting closer. The way a deer senses a wolf long before it sees it. She clutched her toy bear, but she wasn't that same frightened child anymore. She was changing, growing stronger. Jack could see it in the way she moved, in the way she watched the shadows. The creature had been near the cabin last night. Jack had seen it for a brief second, tall, black, not shaped like any living thing on Earth. It had no face, only a smooth shell and red lines that pulsed with light. It didn't walk, it glided just above the snow, and wherever it passed, the snow melted. And the ground steamed. Jack had aimed his rifle, but his hands froze. Something inside him told him that bullets wouldn't work on it. This thing wasn't just hunting. It was scanning, searching, tracking Luma like a machine programmed with only one purpose: capture. Jack and Luma moved into the underground cellar again. He had added more supplies there, blankets, food, even a battery light. He set up noise traps around the cabin, hanging cans, broken glass, tripwires. They wouldn't stop the creature, but they might warn him in time. Luma watched him work. Quiet but calm, she reached out and touched the battery light. With just a soft breath, it became brighter, glowing like a lantern from the stars. Jack blinked in surprise. "You did that?" he asked. She gave a tiny smile. Her powers were growing, and she was beginning to control them. That evening, Jack taught her a new word. He pointed at himself and said human, then at her and said alien. She frowned slightly, thinking. Then she pointed to herself and said softly, "Luma." Jack smiled. "Yes, Luma." Then she touched his chest. "Yaka, Luma." Together, Jack's smile faded as he looked toward the hatch. They would need to run soon. This cabin, this hiding place, it was no longer safe. The next morning, the sun never rose. Clouds covered the sky like thick gray sheets. The snow stopped falling, but the air grew colder. Then Jack heard the sound. Not loud, not near, just a distant hum. Almost like wind, but deeper, mechanical, alive. He peeked through a crack in the trapdoor and saw it. The creature was back, but it wasn't alone this time. Two more floated beside it, smaller, but just as strange. Their bodies shimmered with a strange energy. and their movements were slow but focused. They were searching the area, moving in circles, scanning every rock, every tree, every footprint. They were getting closer. Luma climbed up beside Jack and placed her hand on his arm. Her eyes glowed brighter than ever before. She closed her eyes, and for a second, everything went silent. No wind, no hum, no sound at all. Then the walls of the cabin vibrated softly. Jack looked around, alarmed. "What are you doing?" he whispered. Luma opened her eyes, and a wave of blue energy pulsed through the floor. Outside, the creatures paused. Confused, they began to retreat just slightly. She had blocked their scanners. Even if only for a moment, Jack knew what they had to do. "We leave tonight," he said. "We'll head to the mountains, deeper into the snow." "They won't expect that." Luma nodded slowly. She was ready as darkness fell. Jack packed their supplies into a backpack. Luma wore his old army jacket, which looked huge on her small frame. She pulled the hood over her silver hair. Jack armed himself, not just with weapons, but with tools, rope, a compass. He didn't know where they'd go, but they couldn't stay here. Not with hunters this close, not with her power growing stronger. They stepped out into the snow, the cold biting at their faces behind them. The cabin stood quiet, empty, but not for long as they disappeared into the trees. A red light flickered in the distance. The creatures had returned. And this time, they had found the cabin. One of them raised its long, claw-like arm and touched the front door. With a flash of red light, the door melted like ice. They entered, moving slowly, searching, but it was too late. Jack and Luma were already gone. The hunt had begun again, but now the prey was fighting back. The sky above the forest was black. No stars, no moon, only clouds moving fast like smoke. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the sound of danger. Jack and Luma had climbed into the higher mountain woods. The snow was deeper, the air thinner, but it was safer for now. They built a small shelter under rocks. Hidden from sight, Jack used tree branches and mud to cover the opening. It wasn't much, but it was home for the night. Luma sat beside a small fire, her hands open, glowing faintly blue. She was tired, but she didn't show fear. Her face had changed over the past days. No longer just a scared child. Now, she looked calm, ready. Jack sat across from her, cleaning his old rifle. He didn't expect it to stop what was chasing them, but it made him feel useful. It gave him a purpose: protect her at any cost. That night, Jack had another dream. But this one wasn't a memory. It was a warning. He saw Earth covered in shadow, towers rising from the oceans. Glowing red, he saw people running, screaming, hiding. And in the center of it all, Luma, standing on a hill, her body glowing like a star. She raised her arms, and the sky cracked open with light. The shadows vanished, turned to dust. Then Jack woke up, breathless, cold sweat on his face. Luma was awake too. Sitting beside him, "I saw it," he whispered. She nodded slowly. She had seen it too. Their bond was stronger now. She could share not just memories, but visions. And in those visions, she was not just a child. She was something more, a light against darkness. The next day, they found signs in the snow. Footprints not human. Large, deep, and burned around the edges. The hunters were back, and they were closing in fast. Jack knew they couldn't keep running forever. They had to make a choice: hide and wait, or stand and fight. Luma placed her hand on his chest and said softly, "Fight." Jack smiled sadly. "Then we make a plan." They returned to an old ranger station hidden in the forest. It had power, tools, and a strong steel basement. Jack used to train here years ago. He knew the place inside and out. They fixed the doors, set traps, and prepared for the worst. Luma created light shields, soft blue walls of energy that moved like Water, they wouldn't last forever, but they might slow the hunters down. As night fell, a strange noise filled the air, a low humming, like machines coming to life. Then they appeared, tall, silent, inhuman shapes moving between the trees. Their eyes glowed red. Their arms stretched like blades. They didn't speak, didn't shout. They simply moved toward the station with perfect silence. Luma stood at the front door, calm, still glowing. Jack aimed his rifle and waited. As the first creature stepped forward, Luma raised her hands. A blast of blue light hit the creature, sending it flying back into the trees. Another came, and she stopped it with a shield, but they kept coming, faster, angrier. Jack fired, his bullets bouncing off their armor. "Go to the basement," he shouted, but Luma didn't move. Her eyes turned bright white, and suddenly, a wave of energy burst from her body. Everything froze, the air, the sound. Even time itself seemed to stop for 1 second. Then the creatures shattered like glass, falling into pieces that faded into snow. Jack watched in disbelief, but it wasn't over yet. A new ship appeared in the sky, black, wide, and humming with dark energy. It hovered above the trees, then slowly landed near the station. The door opened, and a figure stepped out, tall, elegant, glowing silver. It was her, Luma's mother. Jack stepped forward. Stunned, Luma stared at the figure with wide eyes. The woman smiled, but there was sadness in her face. She spoke in a soft, musical language, and Luma answered. Jack didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling. Reunion, love, pain. Luma ran into her mother's arms. For a moment, the world was still, but then another shape appeared behind the mother. A dark one, a spy, a traitor. Hidden among her people, it raised a weapon toward Luma, ready to strike. Jack moved before thinking. He tackled the shadow to the ground, fighting with everything he had. Luma screamed, and the air shook in one final burst of power. Luma raised her arms. A beam of blue light shot into the sky. The shadow burned away, screaming without a sound. Then all was quiet again. Luma dropped to her knees, exhausted. Her mother rushed to hold her, whispering soft words in their language. Jack stood nearby, breathing hard, blood on his face, but alive. He looked at Luma, and she looked back. They didn't need words. They had one, but a choice still remained. Would she'll stay or leave with her people? Snowflakes danced through the cold morning light. The battle was over. The silence had returned. But it was not the same silence from before. It was deeper now, full of memory, full of meaning. Smoke rose gently from the broken trees around the T. Ranger Station. The air smelled of ash and stars, of war and peace at once. Luma sat on the ground, leaning into her mother's arms. Her small body was tired. Her glow was dim. She had used everything inside her to save them, to stop the shadow that had followed her across the stars. Now the danger was gone, but a new question remained. Where did she belong? Jack stood a few feet away, his face bruised, his arm wrapped in a torn cloth. He didn't speak. He didn't want to interrupt. Luma's mother looked at him with soft, silver eyes. She nodded once, slowly, with deep respect. Jack nodded back. They understood each other without words, both protectors, both warriors, in their own way. A second alien figure stepped out from the ship, smaller, quiet, with a glowing device in hand. They were preparing to leave. The ship hummed with low, warm light. Luma's mother gently took her hand. Standing up, she looked at the sky. Then, at the open ramp of the ship, it was time to go. But Luma didn't move. She looked at Jack, her eyes full of something deeper than a child's gaze. She took a slow step toward him, then another. She reached out and touched his hand. "Yaka," she whispered. Then she pointed to her chest. "Luma." Then she touched her hand to his heart and whispered one last word. "Home." Jack didn't speak. His throat was tight. his chest heavy. She had made her choice, not because Earth was safer, not because it was easier, but because in a cold, dangerous universe, she had found something rare. Love, not from her people, not from her planet, but from a human, a broken, lonely man in a quiet, snowy forest. Luma turned back to her mother and nodded. Slowly, her mother stepped forward, kneeling in front of her. She placed a glowing crystal in Luma's hand, then gently touched her forehead. It was a silent blessing, a final goodbye. She didn't argue, she didn't try to force her to leave. Because she understood, this was her daughter's new path. The mother walked back to the ship without looking back. The ramp closed, and the ship began to rise slowly. Snow swirled around it as it lifted above the trees. Luma stood beside Jack, watching it disappear into the clouds. No tears fell. She simply held his hand tighter. The sky cleared as the ship vanished. A warm sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. It touched the forest with golden light, and for the first time, Jack smiled without fear. They had survived. They had changed. Together, in the days that followed, Jack rebuilt the cabin. Stronger this time, Luma helped, lifting tools with her mind. Fixing broken things with glowing hands, she learned new words every day: sky, friend, safe. And Jack began to laugh again. Not often, not loud, but real, soft laughter that had been lost for years. At night, they sat by the fire. Luma would draw planets in her notebook, telling stories through symbols and light. Jack would sip coffee, nodding as if he understood. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't, but it didn't matter. They were family now. One night, months later, a soft light blinked in the sky. Not a threat, not a ship, just a distant star. Luma looked at it and smiled. Then she whispered something Jack didn't know. A word from her world, a goodbye, or maybe a promise. And Jack simply said, yeah. He didn't need to understand every word, because he understood her. The world never knew what had happened in that forest. No news, no reports, no answers. Just a man and a strange little girl who never quite fit in, but who lived quietly in a cabin where the snow always fell just a little softer, where the fire never burned out, and where the stars above always seemed a little closer.